7. I'm just trying to finish it. Yes, I know. Just making Good morning, everyone. I should like to welcome all of you, viewing and listening audience, to the 19th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs. Today, the committee is convening its first public hearing pursuant to its examination of the existing anti-fraud and customer protection systems in the financial services sector of Trinidad and Tobago. During the course of our public hearing, members of the listening and viewing audience are invited to post or send their comments via the Parliament's various social media platforms: Facebook page, ParlView, the Parliament's YouTube channel, and Twitter. So, as I said, we're looking today at an examination of the existing anti-fraud and customer protection systems in the financial services sector. Cybersecurity is something that is new to us. What it is the practice of protecting internet-connected systems such as hardware, software, and data from cyber threats. It is used by individuals and enterprises to protect against unauthorized access to data centers under the computerized system. An effective cybersecurity strategy can provide a strong security posture against malicious attacks designed to access, alter, delete, destroy, or extort an organization or user system and sensitive data. We're all very concerned. We've been reading in newspapers. We have been listening to the various media about cyber attacks. And everyone is concerned about protecting money and other valuable things that we have from fraud. Today, I want to welcome some important stakeholders to our first meeting dealing with this topic. The Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, including the Financial Services Ombudsman, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. I am Hazel Thompson Ahi, and I'm the chairman of this committee, and I now invite my fellow members of the committee to introduce themselves to you.
Hasselbackers, member.
Jayanti Lachmilial, member.
Lawrence Hislop, member.
So what is the purpose of today's hearing? To engage government stakeholders. So it's a two-part hearing. Today we have persons involved in government, and those persons have a regulatory function or law enforcement function as it relates to combating fraudulent conduct in our financial services sector. So the objectives of this inquiry are: one, to determine the nature and prevalence of fraudulent practices, cybersecurity threats, and other operational risks within the financial services sector. Two, to gain greater insight into the impact of such practices, threats, and risks on the well-being of clients and customers. 3, to determine the mechanisms that are being utilized by commercial banks and other financial services providers to counteract financial fraud, cybersecurity threats, and other related risks. And 4, to determine the contribution that state actors can make in counteracting fraudulent practices, cybersecurity threats, and other related risks within the financial services sector. Now, you have heard me talk about banks. We don't have the banks this morning, and we don't have other agencies, the credit unions. They will appear on the next occasion. So we invite now opening statements of the entities that are before us this morning, beginning with the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. Now I understand Mrs. Michelle Francis Panto, the Deputy Inspector of Financial Institutions from the Central Bank, is here. The governor was supposed to be here on the last occasion, and maybe because he appeared before me the last time, he was glad that... So please let him know that I have noted his absence. I would not say that I miss him, but I would have been happy to have him. But I'm sure that he has chosen well. So I now invite you to make your opening statement.
Thank you, Chair and members of the JSC. On behalf of the Central Bank, we would like to commend the JSC for this important initiative. We may all know someone, be it family, friend, relative, co-worker, that was a victim of financial fraud, and we know that this can be very traumatic, as you're not even aware that it is taking place. Financial fraud is real, and it is evolving. Fraudsters are unknown and online and in any part of the world, draining your bank account at wee hours of the morning. Education, proper safeguards by financial institutions, and strong enforcement by the regulators, by the law enforcement agencies, and the courts are key to lowering the impact or incidence of financial fraud. In this regard, the Central Bank is concentrating its efforts to treat with cybersecurity and fraud on 5 main areas. We continue to work with the financial institutions to strengthen fraud detection and treatment through our ongoing supervisory activity. We continue to work with financial institutions on anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism issues. This is through our anti-money laundering unit, spearheaded by Nadira, who is a member of our team here, Nadira Rahmatullah. We are ensuring redress for customers, for persons unable to resolve issues with banks and insurance companies, and extending public education with other regulators to help persons not become soft targets for fraudsters. And this is spearheaded by the Financial Services Ombudsman's Office. We are shoring up our cybersecurity defenses and engagement with financial companies to strengthen our capacity against cyber fraud and attacks, including via information sharing on cyber incidents. And our Assistant Manager, Keisha Lashley, in our Financial Technology and Information Supervision Department, is here today as a member of the team. The Central Bank therefore looks forward to contributing and also learning, and we stand ready to provide further input on these matters.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members and all present, stakeholders as well. I am Arlette Groom, Senior Superintendent of the Fraud Squad Unit, TTPS, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. With me today, I have Woman Inspector Smith and Inspector Thomas. Unfortunately, my legal officer fell ill, so I am very saddened of his absence. But we will fill the gap as necessary. It is indeed our pleasure to be here before you and your team, ma'am. And the interfacing is that we can do better for TNT. And on the aspect of the things that we are plagued with, we want to discuss culture of the fraud that happen in Trinidad and Tobago, how the computer age and the laws that we currently have, how they do not interrelate. We are stagnated in some places. And the requisite training that we have engaged in order to combat, and the partnership with our stakeholders, which we hope that we can do more in policy making or getting memorandum of understandings. So we have engaged other external agencies for such training, such as the British High Commission in cryptocurrency training, the US Embassy in combating public corruption, Atterlock Jack in anti-money laundering. We do have input from time to time from the FIU, Mr. Stoddard and Company, and other main stakeholders that we interface with. But to put it straightly, that we are still, I would say, a step behind. So with the input today, and whatever would come out of this discussion, we are hoping that it would chart a way forward for us with the stakeholders and government and other private sectors to chart the way forward to ensuring TNT can better be aware of the fraud that is taking place, those schemes that you don't see the perpetrator like in blue-collar crime, and how best we can address in the investigation capacity of these frauds. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think your commissioner would have been proud of you.
Indeed, ma'am, indeed.
Now I have Mr. Nigel Stoddard, Director of Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chair and members, and to the viewing and listening public as well. I would like to firstly introduce my team with me. I have Ms. Mary Campbell, the Deputy Director of the FIUTT, as well as Mr. Kevin Radix, the Director of Compliance and Outreach Supervision, and Ms. Shavana Sharma, our legal professional at the FIUTT. I want to thank the members for inviting the FIUTT to this hearing. As well, it's very timely for this hearing and the expected outcomes of this hearing. The FIUTT has continually been working with the other stakeholders, both private and public, such as the different associations, as well as the TTPS, in particular, the Fraud Squad, the Anti-Corruption Bureau, the White-Collar Crime Unit, the Financial Investigation Branch, all dealing with money laundering and financing of terrorism, of which fraud is a part of. The FIU also engage and collaborate regularly with the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission, as we have MOUs for the operation of the three supervisory authorities. In addition, the outcome of this hearing would definitely assist the public, the general public, in understanding or being more aware of the different cyber threats that are out there. In the past and continuing, the FIU has continuously published alerts, advisories, as well as typologies on various kind of specified offenses, as well as money laundering relating to fraud and other activities. And the FIUTT would continue to do so. And we are definitely hoping that the information would, coming out of this hearing, would at least reach further in terms of more persons in this society to have a better understanding and be aware of the potential of not losing their hard-earned currency. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I must say the FIU is one agency that always reaching out to people in a number of ways. Because I know why you're doing it, but I will say no more at this stage. You're a very busy organization. Now that Mr. Scotland is here, I will proceed to ask the other members. He has returned, you see, so we are going to go around now and the other members will introduce themselves to you. So let us begin with Mr. Scotland. He didn't arrive from Scotland, but he is.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Keith Scotland, member.
There's some the other officials from the central bank.
Yes,
Introduce your members.
sorry, apologies, JSC, to the JSC. I've neglected to mention my team members here.
Okay.
So I did mention them in passing in my introductory remarks, but a more formal representation is required. So I'm spearheading the central bank team, Michelle Francis Panto as Deputy Inspector of Financial Institutions. Along with me, I have Mr. Dominic Studdard, who is the Financial Services Ombudsman. I also have Ms. Nadira Rahamatullah. She's the manager of our anti-money laundering unit in the Financial Institutions Supervision Department of the Central Bank. There is Mr. Fariz Hardit Singh. He's the assistant manager in the Office of the Financial Services Ombudsman. Nadira. Fariz Hardit Singh. And Ms. Keisha Lashley. She's the assistant manager in our IT department. And you know the ombudsman here, Mr. Dominic Studdard. Right.
All right. Next entity.
Good morning, Mr. Scotland, and to the chair and everyone else. I have with me Inspector Damian Thomas and Woman Inspector Tricia Smith. And my name is Arlette Groom, Senior Superintendent.
We got that one. Let's have the FIU.
Good day, Member Scotland, and to the other members. With me today is Deputy Director of the FIUTT, Ms. Mary Campbell, Mr. Kevin Radex, Director of Compliance and Outreach, Supervision at the FIU, and Ms. Shavana Sharma, our legal professional at the FIU.
All right. Okay. So we will proceed with the questioning. And I just want to remind you to direct your questions and concerns through the chair. When you're about to speak, you activate the microphone, and when you finish, you take it off. But we ourselves have to remember that as well. So we will proceed, starting with the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, you speak.
Madam Chair, with your leave, may I open the baton, please, with the start of the interrogation?
Yes, you may. The last shall be the first.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. The Central Bank, from your submissions, and we are trying to assess the anti-fraud and customer protection systems put in place, and you would agree with me that the Central Bank in this regard ought to lead from the front. Would you agree with that proposition? Yes.
Yes.
Well, no, if you disagree, you can let me know. I think it's a proposition that Central Bank as the overriding overseer ought to lead from the front.
Yes. We are the regulator of the financial system. In terms of how we regulate the financial system with respect to fraud and cybersecurity, our role is to ensure that the institution really has the requisite systems in place, right? So it starts from a corporate governance perspective in terms of the institution setting the tone at the top and having zero tolerance for fraudulent or illegal activity. Instituting, making sure that the board and the senior management of the institutions are fit and proper persons, and that they ensure that the requisite frameworks are put in place to internal controls, risk management practices, policies and procedures that will mitigate any instances of fraudulent activity and lessen any potential for cyber attacks.
And do you have at the central bank a unit that is that specializes or that is mandated to specifically deal with this emerging? It's always existed, but it's emerging in a different, it's morphing now. Do you have a particular aspect or particular part of your organization that deals with anti-fraud and customer protection systems or monitoring of it at the central bank?
Well, I will mention it in different parts. So there is no one unit that is specializing in cybersecurity and fraud, right? Just to say, we are not fraud investigators. We take it from an operational risk standpoint and ensure that the requisite controls, internal controls, risk management processes, et cetera, in place, right? But there's no particular unit. There's a financial institution supervision department that does ongoing supervision of financial institutions and monitoring. There's the market conduct function now resides under the Office of the Financial Services Ombudsman. In terms of cybersecurity supervision specifically, there is no unit established at this point in time. We are shoring up resources. We are retraining and reskilling examiners. We have, to date, we have utilized a whole of institution approach where we utilize persons from other divisions like our IT department, our examination department, our internal audit, our risk, in terms of doing any specific cyber on-site.
So would you think, Madam, that the time, Madam Deputy Inspector, has come now, seeing that the cybersecurity is now a serious issue and that some of the perpetrators, they have morphed into more sophisticated ways, and bearing in mind the advent of artificial intelligence, do you not think that maybe now is an appropriate time, not at all impeaching on your organizational structure, but is not a time for the central bank as the general overseer to have a specified department that deals with that oversight?
The central bank is aware that cybersecurity has been increasing. With the efforts towards digitalization, we know this is only going to increase. It is one of the top 2 risks everywhere in the world, cybersecurity. We have, in this regard, we would have commissioned technical assistance from the International Monetary Fund, and that has been ongoing. We have been training our examiners. A report was published by the IMF. It was publicly available. One of the recommendations is to shore up our resources with respect to cybersecurity. So this is under active consideration at the bank at the present time. How that will evolve, whether it's a specialized unit, whether it's additional persons, has not been determined at this point.
Thank you. And looking at your submission, particularly at page 17, paragraph 2, relative to the various guidelines implemented to safeguard data protection, it was highlighted in your submissions at page 17, paragraph 2, that a recommendation that end-to-end encryption be utilized for the transmission of customer passwords. You see that? From your supervisory checks, to what extent are financial institutions adhering to the above recommendations, particularly in light of what you have told us here, which is news to me, Madam Chair, that cybersecurity is either 1 or 2 now on the risks identified globally.
Oh, okay. All right. In terms of whether we are sure this is happening, can I ask, we have not done those types of on-site verification exercises to date, right? What we have done to date is that we have done self-assessment reviews as we build our capacity to do on-site supervision. So we are in the process now. We have just issued a cybersecurity guideline as at September 2023. Responses to those questionnaires are due by March, end of March this year. So we are awaiting those responses in order to...
It's okay, Madam.
Yeah.
Focus. Member Bacchus
Yeah.
is having
Yeah.
a sidebar. You focus
Yes,
on
So at this
responding.
point in time, we are awaiting responses to that cybersecurity guideline in order to assess where the areas where there may be gaps. And institutions are also required to submit detailed action plans along with those cybersecurity self-assessments. And based on those self-assessments, we will distill where the gaps may be identified for us to do further work. So we are still in the process. We have not done those particular on-site supervision exercises as yet to verify. So we are basing our view on their responses at this present point.
But you would agree that that is a critical component in
of
your
course.
audit and oversight.
Yes.
And finally, for this round, it was noted at paragraph 3, page 15 of your submissions, that supervisory actions may include the issuance of compliance letters.
Yes.
Could you tell us how many compliance letters and fines were issued by the Central Bank's Financial Institution Supervision Department between 2020 and 2023?
All right, so the entire paragraph reads through its examination of financial institutions, right? As indicated previously, we have not yet examined financial institutions with respect to cybersecurity. It's really based off of really self-assessments. We were due to conduct on-site examinations in 2020, commencing 2020, and then COVID hit. So of course we had to pivot, and it was a lot, we adopted a questionnaire type of approach and virtual interviews, but we weren't there to do on-site verification of their processes at the time. So we are now restarting that process, and we are restarting it in a more studied approach where we have invited the IMF to do training of our staff. That is ongoing. We recently just had, end of February, we had the second phase of the training from the IMF where we were trained on the supervisory toolkit that the IMF uses. So that process on doing on-site supervisions and verification is ongoing.
Madam Chair, through you, I think you would agree, ma'am, that it is now crucial that the on-site visit start as without any undue delay. Madam Chair, I think that is something that we want to convey. And do you think that that is something that you can accept, that it's crucial that on-site starts without any undue delay?
Well, the central bank has accepted the need to do on-site examinations, and it is for that reason we are training our examiners. So we have to equip our examiners to be able to do effective on-sites of cybersecurity.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, all right.
Just before we move on from this topic, through you, Chair, I just wanted to find out, is there a timeline that you have in mind in terms of moving from the preliminary self-assessment phase into the gap analysis phase and then ultimately onto on-site examinations, specific for cybersecurity?
Yes, we expect by the next fiscal year, which is our 24-25, to commence on-site reviews.
In your submission, you stated that Section 35 of the FIA requires directors of a licensee or a financial holding company to notify the Inspector of Financial Institutions of any developments that pose material risk to the licensee or FHC. Could you give examples of what you categorize as a material risk?
Materiality, of course, is a matter of judgment. It depends on the size of the institution, etc. And therefore, we have not set thresholds for the institution with respect to materiality, but we give them considerations. So things like you have to look at the volume of impacted customers, things like the potential impact on reputation, impact on your earning, your income, your earnings, your capital, your profitability. Those are some of the considerations that you will consider.
You also stated that banks are required to report promptly all incidents that lead to a breach of customer information to you. How many such incidents were reported to you for the period 2020 to 2023, can you say?
Right, so one word was missing there that lead to a material breach of customer information. So we would have, it's not all incidents are reported, because that will be overwhelming, and it's, all incidents are not material to an institution.
Of course.
Right? So there was 6 material incidents of fraud reported over that period. And they involved matters pertaining to check fraud, withdrawal of funds by customers in excess of deposited balances, employee fraud, using fraudulent identification, signatures and documents, etc. So that is, those the 6 incidents of fraud from the commercial banks. But then the general public also reported, insurance companies, also provided 52 notifications of financial fraud. And that was primarily involving their sales reps and agents for that period, for things like non-remittance of insurance premiums, dishonored checks, and fraudulent certificates and documents.
But 6 reports, doesn't that strike you as odd and strange, having regard to what the anecdotal evidence was revealed?
Well, we actually, because to do a verification exercise, we don't really get information on all breaches, as I mentioned previously. So we actually polled the sector to find out what was happening in terms of their credit cards and debit cards, in terms of cybersecurity. And actually the information we got back over, the aggregate information for the 3-year period was like about 20,000, just about 20,000 cards were impacted or compromised over the period. But when you look at that in relation to the number of cards in issue, you have about over 850,000 debit cards in issue and over 250,000 credit cards in issue. So the materiality is very low. It's like 2%. So we recognize that it is a source of anxiety for anybody where their card is breached. But when you look at the relative numbers, they are quite low.
So you're comfortable that,
Oh, I wouldn't use the word comfortable because we do see the institutions in the post-2017, 2018 era, they would have enhanced the security on their cards by employing that international standard, the Europay, MasterCard, Visa technology, what we call EMV technology on the cards. So that reduced the incidence of skimming on cards, right? But what we're seeing increasing now based on the data that we received is that card not present transaction fraud is increasing. So the things doing like when you do online payments and you give out your numbers and that type of fraud, that is increasing.
Good morning again. Let me just follow up a bit on that. And I want to, it is actually a question of aligning this properly. So even in the 6 that you mentioned from a material risk perspective, in the world of cybercrime and the utilization of cyber technology to impact financial institutions, those things really don't fit into it. The 6 really that you had, because it's more of rudimentary type fraud that you're dealing with. The large scale penetration and successful infiltration of organizations has not happened in the banking sectors. From what you can see, that hasn't happened in Trinidad, right?
So those were the other fraud matters. There was 6 incidents of cybersecurity incidents reported to us. None were from the commercial banks. 5 were from persons in the insurance, companies in the insurance sector, and 1 was a non-bank.
So it is happening just not in the banking sector. And what do you attribute that to?
Not to the extent that will cause a cyber. What we have seen to date is based on, and this is based on the reviews that we would have done through self-assessments and questionnaires, is that we recognize that the cyber security in the banking sector is stronger than other sectors. So in terms of how they manage cyber risk, there are processes in place. They may not all be perfect, and they are evolving given what is happening in cybersecurity, but generally they have frameworks in place to treat with cyber risk.
Thank you. On that note, generally speaking, as a regulator regulating different types of institutions, the commercial banks, non-banks, and others, you would observe some, I don't want to use the word disparity, but sort of a disparity in terms of the amount that these institutions can invest in cybersecurity, the levels at which they operate. We have the banks that have a foreign connection would obviously adopt perhaps sometimes a higher standard. From the regulatory perspective, are you concerned about the amount of investment being made by the smaller institutions and not the commercial banks then, in terms of their cybersecurity practices, in terms of technology and so on? Is that something as a regulator you look at? And then have you considered ways that you could encourage and assist these other smaller institutions in terms of beefing up their cybersecurity mechanisms?
Right. Well, in terms of, we look at proportionality, right? So some of the smaller institutions, as you mentioned, will not be so sophisticated in their technology and their apparatus. So we will expect that their expenditure is in line with what the activities and the services and their systems, right? So they may not have to expend significant amounts to shore up their cyber defenses, right? For the larger organizations, yes, we expect the bells and whistles. So the international organizations, they will have more centralized cybersecurity programs in place because they will be getting that assistance from their parents and other companies in the group. And then our local institutions, of course, they will have to ensure that their cyber defenses are in keeping with the size and the risk of their institutions.
And sorry, through you, Chair, and this is an assessment that you look at. You look at the size of their risk and you would look at their investments.
Well, risk assessment is our business. Yes.
Right, and you would determine if it is that you're satisfied with how their measures line up against their risk, so to speak, and the exposure.
Yes, so in parts, as I mentioned, because we have now issued the cybersecurity guideline and getting those self-assessments, we'll be in a better position after we receive those self-assessments to see where the institutions are in terms of their cybersecurity mechanisms.
Chair?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on what we're treating with the 6 transactions, what is considered significant? What is considered a significant fraud event or material fraud event? And I'll follow on from that as you answer that.
All right. Well, we tried to provide some guidance in terms of the cyber, and I'm speaking in terms of the cybersecurity guideline, best practices guideline that was recently issued. One of the things we have now introduced is a cyber incident reporting framework, right? So that cyber incident reporting framework tries to determine give some criteria or considerations for what is a reportable event, right? And some of the criteria we would have indicated is that it has the impact has potential consequences for other companies of the domestic financial system. The impact It impacts the company's systems, affecting financial market settlement, confirmations or payment, or impacts payment services, impacts operations, infrastructure, data, and/or systems, including but not related to confidentiality, integrity, or availability of customer information. It disrupts the business systems and/or operations. It causes the disaster recovery teams to be activated. It impacts a large number of external customers and/or has negative reputational impacts. And based on the company's own assessment, it might be based on a priority or severity of tier 1 or tier 2, and the incidents that breach internal risk appetite or thresholds as part of the cybersecurity strategy or policy. So we have not put a dollar value or anything to it. We expect, because materiality and definition of risk appetite and what is a loss threshold that is material for the institutions is something that they do in the normal course of their business. So they define it, but if based on our review or information coming to us, if they don't report something that may be material, which they did not consider material, and it comes to our attention, then we will investigate further and ask for a report.
So Chair, outside of the framework that you've set up, Deputy Inspector, of the 6 that you have that have been reported, could you identify if there's could you share with us what the dollar amount may have been for?
I don't have that information, sorry. Yeah.
Could it be provided to us, Chair, in writing?
I'm not even sure if, because sometimes you have an event, but you may not know what the loss is, but we will try to see if we can get the information for you, if it's available.
So it's reported, but it's not, so the details, what details would be in that specific report?
Well, we will expect if there's a loss that they would provide that loss amount if it is available, or if there is a loss amount.
So the six, based on your submission, you received notification of 6 instances.
This was in 5 insurance companies, right?
No, this was from the commercial banks. The 6 instances of significant fraud events from the commercial banks and non-banks. So
Right.
there were none from the
Yes.
banks out of the 6.
All right, sorry. Yes, so there were financial fraud events from the commercial banks, but I would have mentioned that some of the issues that related to employee fraud, which might have resulted in a loss of due to customer okay, let me go back to
Yeah, right.
let me go back to the report, sorry. So I don't want to misrepresent.
Yes, it speaks to
Oh,
employee
right.
fraud
So
using fraudulent.
it was
right.
check fraud,
Right.
right? Withdrawal of fund by customers in excess of deposited balances. And I guess we can get those figures for you to give you a ballpark figure. And then the other one was employee fraud using fraudulent identifications, signatures, and documents.
Because I believe there should be a dollar value, because the banks are in the business of
So we could
making
probably
money.
give you an aggregate in terms of what might have been the financial loss impacting if we do have that figure.
Okay, because we'd like to know if the person who was affected, or the customer or the institution that was affected, if that money that they would have lost was recouped.
Well, it will depend on the nature of the investigation, right? So if it's an employee fraud matter that now has to be prosecuted, they would file some report to the relevant law enforcement agency, and then they will have to determine how they will recoup that information. So whether they are able to recoup it from the employee themselves, or use other means, or write it off as a loss.
Okay. So could you also share with us the most prevalent method of fraud that the institutions may have encountered, based on what you have here, the check fraud, employees using fraudulent identifications and documents to process loans. I don't know if you have that information.
Well, based on the information that was provided here, because it's not consistent, I think check fraud is a major issue around with the financial institutions.
So, Madam Chair,
The
is it
withdrawal
possible-
of funds by customers in excess, in terms of the 6 reported incidents,
Yes.
the withdrawal of funds in excess of the deposited balances, that was not a prevalent issue. That was like a one-off issue. Employee fraud, there will be instances, but I wouldn't say that is prevalent. So of the areas that reported here, I would say check fraud would have been the most prevalent fraud. Yeah. Yeah.
Deputy Inspector, you sure? Or you?
Yes, I'm
Right,
sure.
Okay, so, sure.
In the descriptors to determine a reportable incident, you use words such as has the potential, or impacts, or disrupt, or causes. So the subjective nature of the wording of what constitutes a reportable incident, would you not agree with me that it would prevent organizations from not reporting incidents? And before you answer that, in addition to that, tell me, don't you see that it's not in the best interest of the banks to report incidents that would endanger their reputation and cause further disruption, because members of the public, if they get wind of this, then it could cause a run on the bank. So don't you see that the way that you frame the question that you ask might in fact be contributing to the underreporting of the incidents?
Madam Chair, I understand the question. I think in terms of the material, because you don't want to also be overwhelmed by each instance, and each instance may not really be material. So we have to be careful, and this is how we frame it in all our guidelines, because we are not running the institutions. So we set the parameters for them to do what is required, and we do our regular checks in terms of ensuring that the governance and the risk management frameworks are fit for purpose for the institution. But there is no way that we can run the institution and check every incident that they have, because they are subject to many incidents on a daily basis, right? And that's why we set the issue. So like where issue may damage the impact of an institution because of the number, the frequency, our expectation is that that will be reported. And the institution themselves will know that, and they will report it, right? If we see something even if it comes to win on social media, because we scan those social media as well, so we see when things come up on social media, and we will engage the institution to determine if this is an issue and if it needs to be reported, right? So if we feel that it's an issue, and we will ask for a report to be submitted, even where it is not submitted.
And have you done so?
Yes, we have done so on numerous occasions.
Has it borne fruit?
Yes.
How often?
Well, I can't quantify it, but...
No, I don't want the exact amount,
Yes.
but give me proportionality, 20% of the time, 25%? Who are you're protecting the public or the banks more?
We have a duty to the public. We have a duty because by ensuring that the banks operate in a safe and sound manner, we are protecting the bank, the public, right? So we have that duty. That's why we are there to regulate the banks.
I did use the word more, but we.
I want to ask about whether the bank, a regulator, is concerned about the number of prosecutions that result from incidents of fraud. And I'll share a personal experience that I had. Now, for context purposes, this was about 2018. I know that there have been improvements in technology with chip and PIN and all of that since then. I used my ATM card at a particular business place. It was the first time I'd ever visited that particular place. I went to bed that night and woke up in the morning and found $20,000 withdrawn from my bank account at an ATM in Woodbrook while I was asleep in San Fernando and at a casino. At midnight when the casino in Port of Spain. At midnight when the balances or your available balance reset, it was done again at the same casino and at the same ATM in Woodbrook. I made a report to Fraud Squad. They prepared, they investigated, they prepared a report for me, handed it to me in my hand, told me to take it to the bank. The bank refunded the money based on the report. I followed up because, of course, with my background and so on, I expected that I would be asked to prepare a statement for the police. And I was informed that the bank, once they refund the money to the customer, now this may not have been material because it's only $20,000 in a $1 billion institution. It was material to me, but it wasn't material to the bank. I don't know if something like that would have been reported to the central bank, one. And two, because of the fact that that card had only been used on that day at a very unusual place, I thought it was very easy to pinpoint where the incident occurred. In fact, the police informed me that they had serious grounds for believing that an employee that it was a pharmacy, an employee at that pharmacy was working hand in hand with a male associate, and that this they had found other people who, in fact, had experienced similar incidents with their Lynx cards when they used them at that particular pharmacy. Now, coming out of all of that, I got back my money, that's fine, but nothing was ever pursued. From the perspective of a general member of the public, there's someone out there with the ability to skim cards and steal people's money while they are asleep is still out there. And I'm concerned that the banks adopted a particular approach and the police appeared to be okay with it, that once the customer was refunded the money, that no further investigation was conducted and that no prosecution obviously resulted in a case where I thought there was at least some good information, solid information to go on in terms of an investigation. Now, again, as I say, for context purposes, this was around 2018, but it remained with me as an incident, and I was advised by the bank. The advice I got from the bank at that point in time was to lower my daily limit as to how much money people could withdraw. And I felt rather offended that that was the quote-unquote, for want of a better word, the justice that I received out of that situation, which was very stressful to me at the time. And I just wonder, as a regulator, whether or not the level of prosecutions and how because protection of the public extends not just to regulatory oversight, but it extends to, I think, in crime in general, whether it's white-collar crime or otherwise, the general concern in this country right now is the level of detection and prosecution for persons engaged in criminal activity. And if that is the case, as a regulator, how do you think, or what do you think your role is to encourage the banks to perhaps collaborate more with law enforcement to see more persons being brought before the courts when you have incidents, as small as they may be in the grand scheme of things, when you have incidents of card fraud and other types of financial crimes taking place and cybersecurity risks?
Well, we will always encourage the banks to report issues to the police if that's the redress mechanism, right? In terms of prosecuting for fraud, that is not the remit or the mandate of the central bank. So it will go to the relevant agencies, and there is a reporting framework for fraud currently to the FIU, and perhaps Mr. Stoddard could speak more to that. In terms of the redress mechanisms available, there is in terms, if the issue does not reach a materiality issue for the institution, and there's not sufficient redress when you bring the issue to the bank itself, because each bank is supposed to have its own redress mechanism, and if you're not satisfied by that redress mechanism, then there are avenues to escalate that process through the Office of the Financial Services Ombudsman, and Mr. Stoddard could speak to that, or to write to the Inspector of Financial Institutions at the central bank. So there are avenues to address with one-off instances that do not breach a materiality threshold for reporting of a wide-scale incident to the central bank. Because the central bank would not treat with each individual cyber incident or fraud matter.
No, of course, I understand that. But in terms of banks having a adopting I don't want to say a policy position, but a practice then, that they don't take further action on certain matters? Is that something you look at as a regulator?
No, because they would, in terms of their materiality report, so when they do report us on a wide-scale employee fraud, that is part of the information they will provide to us, that they are taking action. They would have reported to the police is investigating. So they will do that in a report that is material.
Perhaps we could have a comment from Mr. Groom, Senior Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have an enormous amount of ABM card fraud and credit card fraud. However, the difficulty is because it's like a hidden crime. So, as Ms. Lakshmi Diyal, right, Lakshmi Diyal pointed out, she believed and suspected that it was at a pharmacy. Could have been done with a little skimming device, a little handheld skimming device. She got distracted somewhere, and then some little tiny camera could have picked up a pin if it wasn't a chip card. And even in shimming, they have the device now that will capture every detail on your card, so you don't even need to record anything like a pin, right? So what we look at is that no face, we have no face to put to the camera, like CCTV footage or anything, or the internal cameras. The casino, we have no face, it's just we taking a bet and swiping a card, nobody asks for ID or anything. So when these investigations, I have done many in my 15-year stint at the fraud squad, it leads to a dead end except you can identify someone through footage or otherwise that is actually using the card. And then the bank would normally call in the victim to view the footage when the report is made. And if they can't identify that person, and according sometimes the quality of the footage, it is a dead end. And that is the truth of the matter.
Madam Chair, through you, because it seems to piggyback and dovetail with both your penultimate question and Member Lakshmi Diyal's last question. There seems to be some regulatory gaps that exist now, and regulatory in terms of the laws and in terms of what exists in practice. So, Madam Chair, through this question goes to all our invitees. We looked at a submission at page 14, paragraph 5 of the Central Bank, that the legislation does not specifically define the various types of financial fraud, and in particular does not name fraud facilitated by technology. And that is understandable because at the time when the legislation became law, this may not have been contemplated by the draftsman, so we understand that. Madam Chair, particularly in the area of banking, for example, you know that a check is a shows in action and a check cannot be stolen. I took that as a point in the series. We went all the way to the Privy Council. In other words, if you withdraw a check doesn't form a pool that can be stolen under the Theft Act. And the Court of Appeal had to stretch the definition of the Theft Act in Trinidad and Tobago to include the withdrawal of a check, which is a chosen action, which under the old common law, you cannot steal. So, with that in mind, I have, given the recent occurrences in organizational cybersecurity breaches, and given the fact that you have indicated that cyber theft and cybersecurity is one of the major movers in terms of things that both the central bank and other financial institutions must look at, do you think now that just not the Central Bank Act, but do you think that specific legislation, cyber legislation, as exists in Thailand with the Cybersecurity Act, in Singapore, the Cybersecurity Act, I think in Malawi, the Electronic and Cybersecurity Act of 2016, do you think the time has come now for the implementation of specific legislation. Madam Chair, through you, I'd like to ask that to all our guests.
I would like to defer that question to Keisha Lashley, our Assistant Manager, FTIS, please.
Hi, good morning to the committee and the
I'm not seeing Ms. Lashley. Oh, okay.
Hi, good morning to everyone. Absolutely, it helps. So just in terms of my role, I'm a part of the team that defends the central bank in terms of cybersecurity. So certainly from where we sit, any legislation that helps us and would help in prosecuting persons with malicious intent, prosecuting threat actors, that is to our benefit. So certainly from a defender perspective, absolutely, we welcome any updates, any new legislation that speaks specifically to cybersecurity issues. I know that from a government perspective, we know that things are happening relative to cybersecurity crime and laws that are coming. So we look on and, certainly we will provide any support when it comes to that in terms of legislation from a national perspective. In terms of the bank and our operations within the sector, as the Deputy Inspector shared, certainly we use the existing legislation and we bolster that with guidelines and things of that nature, where we may see that there's an opportunity to provide specific guidance. So,
I hear from the other stakeholders, please, and their views on that, because I do have a suggestion.
Good morning again, Madam Chair. I have just a snippet of the Cyber Bill 2017 that never, in fact, came into enactment. And in it, it affects us greatly because, okay, the Forgery Act is somewhere in 1960 plus. No computers as 63. So uttering, since COVID, most institutions, you have to upload. You have to upload documents, and the law doesn't speak to electronic uttering electronically. Up to day before yesterday, an institution reached out to us where somebody's trying to make an ID with false information and uttered electronically to an institution to be printed. But we don't have any laws to suit that. Even falsification of accounts under the Criminal Offences Act. It doesn't even speak to falsifying those accounts on a computer. So for the avoidance of doubt, where investigation can best be channeled, these cyber laws, or put it, revising the Forgery Act, just like the UK 2006 Fraud Act, which speaks to representation, fraud by representation, and such things. So we are way behind legislatively in properly bringing these matters to any form of fruition. This is my contribution.
Madam Chair, on that note, may I suggest through you that it may not be as dire as you think it is, because there are some components in the arsenal of both of the central bank and the FIU and the police, Senior Superintendent Groom, that may be of assistance. You can, in an amalgam, look at the Data Protection Act, the Electronic Transaction Act, including the Central Bank Act, and the Electronic Transfer of Crime Act, Chapter 9951. Now, if you combine those along with your common law, until new legislation is proclaimed, you may find that there is and there are some avenues in which perpetrators even now can be charged. Of course, you will have to be innovative within the confines of the law, but it is not until such time as the legislation is proclaimed, the new legislation is brought to the Parliament. We cannot just put our hands up in the air, Madam Chair, and say we will allow these breaches to go on, because what will happen, Madam Chair? people's monies will be stolen, hard-earned monies, and it affects not just the individual, it also affects the institution.
Just to, and I have a vested interest in this nonetheless, just looking through my notes from where we are, there are 27 pieces of legislation that I have here that could have some level of impact on what you're doing. And I think what has happened is, in some cases, and I put this to all of you, that the specific honing in on the Data Protections Act, the Electronic Transactions Act, and those and their companion pieces of legislation seems to be where people think the silver bullet lies. And unfortunately, in legislation, it doesn't work that way. It is a combination of things that provide the necessary impacts of what you want. But we do take on board the deficiencies that exist in some of the current legislation to deal with the modernization of the type of crime that we're dealing with. I also want to ask you to, in some ways, be more discreet as it relates to cybercrime, crime using technology, and things of that sort. Not all crimes that involve the use of technology are cybercrimes. And I think it is important to note and to create that distinction. The cybersecurity components for banks, for me, that will be most material will be the things that affect the banking institution itself and not necessarily its individual customers. So ransomware wouldn't necessarily affect as an individual level. That will affect the institution as a global institution itself. And so most of the things that are defined that way would be where the majority of the focus of the institution would be. All of its data, for example. The exfiltration of its data without disrupting its services represents a significant threat to the business itself, because now you have all of its information. That information may not be valuable to something else, but it may be valuable to another financial institution, for example. The idea of protecting its operations so that the bank itself is not rendered offline. Those are the types of things that really immediately spring to mind that would drive the institution, in this case a bank or credit union or anything, to focus its energies on protection. And I think that is the distinction that both Member Scotland and the chair was getting to. How much of this emphasis that is obviously being put into protecting the bank's actual infrastructure and its most valuable assets being its data is actually being transferred to the protection of the citizen and the citizen accounts at an individual level. Because in your submission, when you look at the levels of complaints that you would have received over time for various things, there's really nothing significant that materially affects it from a cybersecurity perspective, any of these large financial institutions. The majority of it really revolves around complaints that you're getting about things that are happening in more discrete and independent things, accounts and transactions, card services, fees and charges. All of this is, the Ombudsman will be under your parts of the report. Loans and credit, privacy and confidentiality, mutual funds, service and advice, etc. Even when you look at categories of financial fraud complaints received, unauthorized transactions, card withdrawals, sum skimming and check fraud, you would understand that under the cybersecurity space that it doesn't fit. So while we harp on that, and that is really to protect the institution itself, we need to know on both sides, particularly from how does the central bank as a regulator view the significant cybersecurity risk associated with the institution itself versus the risk of what is happening at an individual level, like what happened to member Lakshmi Dayal Ramdial's account, and has happened to me as a matter of fact.
I wonder if Mr. Hislop can deal with ombudsman, and then the ombudsman can respond to all of those questions because they may fall into his arena. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we look at the submission, Madam Chair, under Table 2, page 6, we recognize that there is a significant uptick or a larger number of this thing called unauthorized transaction as it relates to categories of financial fraud complaints received. I don't know if the Ombudsman is able to share with us what is the nature of those unauthorized transactions.
Yes, thank you very much. Unauthorized transaction basically involves movement of funds or changes in account balances that were essentially unauthorized by the account holder. It could be that you had a certain balance, you made no withdrawals, no deposits, but the account balance has changed and has nothing to do with interest or fees and charges. Those kinds of things would be deemed unauthorized. You did not sanction those changes.
So I'm a customer. Now even before I get to that, you also share that you had 219 complaints. Do you think that is the actual figure, or could there be more than 219 complaints?
Well, we capture data on people who actually come to us to use the service. I'll tell you this. In the normal course of business, we would see between 12 to 1,500 people on an annual basis. But not everyone who comes to us for service will meet the threshold of what constitutes a valid complaint. So if you go to an institution and you find that you had a very long waiting time and you came to us to complain, we will record you as coming to us, but that won't constitute a valid complaint.
Could you share with us? What is categorized as a valid complaint? Because it may be valid to me as a customer.
Okay, I'll give an example. You went with all your documents and you applied for a loan. You were given some kind of verbal assurance that you seem to have everything in line, that you're likely to get the loan. And when you go back to the institution, for whatever reason, you do not qualify. You could come to us and say, you've come to lodge a complaint because the institution, it seems that you had everything in order, and when you went, you are now told that you can't get the loan. Where we stand, that is not a valid complaint because the institution reserves the right to determine whether or not you qualify on the basis of a risk assessment. To you, it's a valid complaint, but not to our office.
So give us an example, Ombudsman, of a valid complaint.
A valid complaint would be something like, for example, on the insurance side, you were involved in a motor vehicle accident and there is an undue delay in settlement. So what would have constituted a reasonable wait time for you to get your settlement check, provided that you are not liable or if you have full comprehensive or whatever? The delay just seemed to be going on and documents are being asked for. Another valid complaint would be an unauthorized transaction. You got charges against your credit card that you knew nothing about. You didn't make these purchases. The institution would require some period of time to do their investigation, but that is a valid complaint if you did not, in fact, do these transactions. The institution would investigate. It's a valid complaint, and we would make a determination that this is something we want to move forward with as a valid complaint.
Okay. So, Chairman, through you, on a valid complaint, give the committee a time frame from complaint to resolution.
Okay. We generally ask complainants to give the institution some time to at least sort it out internally. But once that doesn't happen and you come to us, we worked out what is our weighted average duration for resolving a complaint, and we are around 90 days, 3 months. Now, that is just the average. There are some things that take more than 120 days, and there are some things that we resolve in less than 30 days.
What causes that variation is the nature and the degree of complexity of the complaints. Some complaints involve a lot more documentation and detail than others.
Madam Chair, through you, we are dealing with the cybersecurity and anti-fraud risks. Sometimes when we deal with those things, we forget actual risk itself, not AI, but actual risk. I want to deal with the issue of financial literacy. For example, in 2022, the National Financial Literacy Survey, it was revealed that 20% of the respondents had fallen prey to pyramid and Ponzi schemes. People, what is being done to educate the public about the pros, cons, legality we have without going into very topical but real issues that are before the court, legality or non-legality of these schemes? What is being done by the central bank? What is being done by the ombudsman? What's being done by the fraud squad? What's being done by the FIU to bring the public or to give more literacy? What is allowable, what is not allowable? Is a susu still legal? You know, because you never know. You all don't know what a susu is, do you? I don't know, but tell us, and I really want to engage you on this. Hassel, you know about a susu? Madam Deputy Inspector, you know what is a susu?
Of course. I have been part of SUSU. Yes.
Tell us, so tell us.
Yes, but this, I will defer to the Ombudsman to answer this question.
But I want to hear from FIU, I want to hear from the fraud squad also. Yes.
Sure, so I'll be brief. From beginning 2007, the central bank established what is well known as the National Financial Literacy Program. Within that program, we do outreach sessions, we do workshops, we publish material on social media, we have a website, we celebrate Global Money Week, we have a Financial Literacy Month. So there are a whole host of activities that the central bank focuses on in terms of public education where financial literacy is concerned. We were on average doing about 20,000 plus persons in sessions. That number fell and we are building up again. Since the advent of COVID, we've been doing a lot of our sessions virtually. We run 8-week entrepreneurship workshops. We teach people about budgeting, saving, investing, home ownership, preparation for retirement, and we also alert you to the pitfall and risk of digital banking transactions, skimming, and all
Phishing.
the other, yes, all the other the risks that digitization of financial transactions has brought with it. So in each of our sessions, we take time to alert people to these things because it's now part of your banking reality.
Chairman, may I, yes?
Can I just add to that, in terms of literacy and education and Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes, that now falls under the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission, so they do a lot of education in relation to that as well.
But Chairman, are they reaching the people though? Are you reaching East Dry River? Are you reaching Nelson Street? In other words, are you making that effort so that people will decide, look, it's not legal to enter into these schemes. It may be better in case of keeping money under the mattress if we go to a bank. Are you engaging? That's yeah, because Chairman, we are about engaging.
I'm very pleased to report that we approach this in a very scientific way. We've segmented the population. So we have children and young adults. We go into primary schools. We have stuff for secondary school age children. We have people who are preparing for retirement. We do faith-based organizations. We do at-risk youths. We're in with the Civilian Conservation Corps. We understand those pain points and the areas in which the messages that we want to get out where financial literacy is concerned is most important, and we focus in a very targeted way in those areas. Now, we don't neglect others. We do employees in the workplace, and we do other people of middle and upper income. But our main focus, where we get the biggest bang for the buck, is focusing on those groups that we consider to be vulnerable and most at risk for things like cybercrime and fraud.
So where are you advertising these programs that you're having? I mean, is it a closely guarded secret?
We're all over social media. We have done just last year about 17 radio interviews. We're on television. We hardly do the newspaper, but social media is one of our main areas in where we target different segments that we want to. So we use the medium most appropriate to the people who we are trying to get the messages to.
No, I'm asking. You're going to have a program. You're meeting with people. Do you have like an interview on the television morning program also to say, look, we're going to be here, so that people will be aware that you're having the program?
Usually we lead up into our events with an ad campaign. The ad campaign will usually involve radio spots on several different stations. So when we're targeting the youth, we use the urban stations. When we're targeting more mature people, we use talk radio stations. When we're targeting certain other categories who we know are online, we use Facebook, Instagram, we use the digital platforms. We use, pardon?
No television.
Television is quite expensive, but we
You are the financial.
I am saying, I am not talking about
do it from time to
paying.
time.
I'm not talking about paid advertising. But you call one of the morning presenters and say, look, I want to have a program. Talk to me. Give me a spot. And they would willingly, because they advertise all kinds of programs in the morning. And a lot of people would more pay attention to that and tell other people. So I'm not talking about paid advertising at all.
The exception of last year, for each of the preceding 4 years, when we were celebrating Global Money Week, we were on each of the morning television stations. So I've been on the circuit many times.
So, but I didn't hear from the police, because police, this could be part of your community policing, because I haven't heard when you all are going to reach Port of Spain. So police, can I hear from you, please? Yes.
Certainly, sir. We have done programs on Beyond the Tape. We have been there several times.
So that we
I have been there, Inspector Smith has been there, Inspector Thomas has been there, and many others. And through our corporate communication department, we send out advisories. And I would say that I think it is working, I would say. Why? Look at the Romans fraud. In 2020, we had 56. 2021, 33. 2022, 20. And 2023, 9. I would say that it is reaching a wider cross-section of the public if the figures speak as they are speaking now. But we continue because you're never finished. It's a work in progress, and you have to alert the public to other such scams that would rear its head, like these Facebook investment scams through Instagram. You're not seeing anybody, you can't get the account holder, it's something mixed up with cyber, and you lost your money. And even with cryptocurrency, when you invest your money in a wallet, there's no commercial bank to make any trace. So it's just in the sky. So these are the things that we are gearing now with education to alert our stakeholders about. But we need proper education and training on them.
Yes, FIU?
Thank you, Member, and thank you, Chair. The FIU has and continue to roll out different publications relative to not only fraud, Ponzi scheme, romance scams, several other different types of scams. Now, in 2020, there was a joint release that was published by the Central Bank, the Trinidad and Tobago Securities Exchange Commission, and the FIU relative to Ponzi schemes. In 2022, the TTSEC again did a publication on their website and circulation of Ponzi schemes and the risk involved on it. The FIU would have again placed that publication as well on our website. With respect to romance scam in particular, the FIU would have engaged with the TTPS, with UE as well in hosting a talk session, so to speak, a roundtable that was publicized by the TTPS as well as the other stakeholders to address romance scam. What we have found is that the medium from the FIU's perspective that is most viewed, so to speak, by the general public, which Member Scotland is really trying to get to, is the YouTube in terms of the short videos. I think that is more effective as it is now. We have started using that platform. We did one. No, not
TikTok.
Not the TikTok.
Well,
but the yeah.
Get with the whatever the medium is. I think regulators, you all need to reach the people so that they understand financial intelligence. To lose your hard-earned cash, well-intentioned as you may be, mind you, the banks, the interest rates of the banks are not encouraging. You know, so you need to reach the people to tell them what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Yeah, and yes, Member Scotland, I do agree with that. And
you agree that the interest rates are not encouraging?
No, I agree that we should reach. I agree that we should reach the general public in a more effective way. It definitely pains to see that persons who earn their hard-earned money, it's I wouldn't say given away, but because of circumstances, which might be relative to their circumstances in terms of wanting to improve their situation, or the mere avenue of being lonely in some instances with the romance scam, that they become prey to these type of online scams. Definitely that's something that we can, as you indicated, as regulators, as well as with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, to advertise more or to try to reach out more to those type of entities. Like I said, we have done a media campaign that would have sent out over 10 different types of flyers relative to romance scam, because as Superintendent Groom had indicated, coming out of, I would say, COVID, what really started it. Prior to COVID, we may have received suspicious transactions relative to romance scam, probably in the vicinity of less than 5. And COVID, it has increased it to over 90-something. And funds in terms of that type of activity. So clearly it's something that is new. When I say new, to the general public in terms of this type of online activity that they are now more interacting with, and yes, you would get that type of victims, unfortunately.
Who is there among you to protect the poor people whose banking accounts fall below $15,000 and the bank grabs $15 until the poor person might be left without any money in the bank? I mean, who is there among you to look at that and to protect, in light of the fact that banks are declaring millions of dollars and maybe more in profits every year? Is there anybody who's looking out for these poor people?
Yes. We would have issued, central bank would have issued market conduct guidelines to the banking sector since 2018, and we would have encouraged in that guideline in terms of having low fee or no fee accounts, having facilities to treat with vulnerable persons and citizens. We recently issued a similar guideline, market conduct guideline for the insurers, for the insurance industry. And we are shoring up our market conduct function, and Mr. Hardit Singh, Fareez Hardit Singh, could speak more to what is happening on market conduct supervision, because we are building up that facility to treat with exactly these issues, to treat with customer complaints and to treat with market conduct of the banks.
It's just gentle persuasion.
I would say more than gentle, but can we, I will defer to Fareez to give a little more information in this regard. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, members. Right now, the market conduct supervision area is under development. So we are developing procedures and processes to which institutions would report these kinds of issues to us, including customer complaints. What you're speaking to specifically may be the dormant accounts, right? When probably somebody's account has not been used for a while, and no? Okay, so.
Might just have their national insurance money going into that account, you know, and the person, you know, will use a certain amount and goes below $15,000, and you have to, they extract dollars from you.
Right, so you're talking about fees and charges, right? So we are also monitoring the fees and charges. We do have reporting, and in time, we will be doing on-site examinations of the institutions to determine what the issue is across, let's say, a thematic review across all the institutions and providing feedback to the institutions. So those sorts of things we have in mind going into the future.
So there's hope. Something is going to happen.
Definitely.
Yes. Thanks. Yes, I just had a comment or a suggestion I wanted to make, coming out from what Member Scotland was asking about public outreach and awareness. Of course, I see the school tour that TT sectors, etc. But as much as we laugh about it a little, the COVID period, a lot of people embarked on pursuing both romance and money-making, quick money ventures via online platforms. And I think that could have led a lot to the skyrocketing of the number of reports. But apart from that, and in my experience and the feedback I get from the public, the low interest rates is one in the bank, but also the more stringent regulatory requirements now from our financial institutions. And of course, I understand why it's there. But the average citizen sometimes feels that it's too much trouble going to a standard. And when they get the alternative, it doesn't have to be something as ridiculous as, you know, the Nigerian prince who just wants to leave you his inheritance, which I get an email about every day. But the fact is that there are persons out there better dressed than all of us in here who will come to your home and sit in your living room and encourage you to invest with them, because they have the most fanciest iPad, and they will show you the cryptocurrency investments they're making and the kind of returns. And people are being lured very easily because they don't have to fill out customer due diligence forms. They don't have to do those things. So I think in terms of your outreach, it might be good from the perspective of a regulator to educate the public as to how those regulations that I'm going to say we, but that you put in place to help with anti-money laundering and all of those things actually is there to protect them, and that it shouldn't be that they look for ways around it, because those ways around it are exactly how they are falling victims to fraud. Because I've encountered quite a few people who tell me that the reason they went to a less than reputable Susu type arrangement with this very smart-looking gentleman who came to their home and educated them about cyber investing and cryptocurrency and all that, is because the banks frustrate them. The low interest rates, the customer service, and the amount of requirements and paperwork and all of those things. So we have to find a way to I think, let the public know that customer service is one thing, but the other requirements are there for their own protection, and perhaps they shouldn't be encouraged to go outside of the regulated financial sector to avoid those things. So it's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to switch gears slightly, Chair, but before I switch gears to TTPS, I just want to ask the Financial Services Ombudsman about your footprint and activity in Tobago. If you could just share with the listening public what your activity is like in Tobago and your footprint.
Okay, at present, we have an office at the Victor E. Bruce building, and we service the Tobago clientele the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. We do it that way, and we continue to monitor the requests for service so that we can make adjustments. If the amount of requests for service increase, we'll up the number of days or increase the number of persons, as the case might be. But we are in Tobago twice a month. We advertise on the local Tobago station, and we're there to receive complaints in person. Outside of that, whether you're in Tobago, Trinidad, Point Fortin, wherever you are, you could go online and submit a complaint to us by one of our online forms or any of our other social media platform. You reach out to us, we'll get back to you in 24 hours, except on a Friday.
So how, so far, could you share with us when that service started and what has been the uptake from the public since you started the service?
We had closed off for approximately 2 years during the COVID period, but we reopened on September 15, 2023. We had a formal opening, or the soft opening, and we actually opened our doors for business on the 27th of September. Since then, we've had about 60 plus persons come in on those Wednesdays that we're there. But what we're doing is mounting a plan to do some clinics in Tobago, because what we found is that a lot of people who come in to us, what they come in to deal with, we don't handle those things. They come in with an NIB matter or credit union matter, not understanding clearly that all we deal with are those issues dealing with banks, non-bank financial institutions, and insurance companies. So we'll clear that up by public education, but 60 plus so far.
So just to piggyback on what Chairman suggested, I think one of the suggestions I could give to you is that one of the months before you come, maybe a day, you come to Tobago the day before the Wednesdays, right? Right, and you spend some time on the media circuit in Tobago, the two Tobago channels, Channel 5 and Tobago Updates, and you have the radio stations as well. Just educating the public in Tobago about what you offer and how often you are there. Do you have staff, or do you come to Tobago with the staff for the 2 days that you do?
We send our people to Tobago. We're in close collaboration with the THA,
right,
but we have trained resolution officers that travel to Tobago. They go up in the morning, come down in the evening. It's a simple process. But we do run our ads consistently on Radio Tamarind. That's one of our main advertising channels, and we use other social media channels and so on. But we take your suggestion.
But not to plug the other stations. There are other stations outside of Cambridge in Tobago that you could also reach out to. But just to, thank you, Ombudsman. Just to switch to the TTPS, I noticed in your submission we treated with page 2. Sorry. The first page in the submission treats with your fraudulent scams. And we noticed a couple, your travel agency, your online, but I want to also add a couple others to those. Construction materials. I saw you had no reports of scams from 2020 to 2022, but in 23 you had 14 reports of construction material scams. For the regular man, we want to get some clarity on what that is, and also as it relates to travel agency and online. And then I also want to treat a couple of other things as it relates to your fraudulent scams.
Yes. With permission of the chair, may I refer this to Woman Inspector Smith, please? Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so with regard to construction materials, the typology of this type of fraud basically is one whereby persons would pay money for construction materials and the perpetrator would basically disappear with their money. They would just vanish and they would get no materials, no word from the person thereafter.
So Chairman, is this through, so you have me a little scared now, Inspector, because I recently did a transaction where I sent money to an entity for materials. Thankfully, I got my stuff. But is this being perpetrated by individuals, or have we had reports of hardware stores involved in that activity as well?
Well, the reports that we have recorded, they are the perpetrators are individuals.
Okay, so most likely some guys say I could get some material for you for a particular amount.
The usual, at a good price, which is the
Get
true
at a
Trinity
good
thing
price,
to
and
say.
then you pay your, and he just disappears. Okay.
That is correct.
So as it relates to your travel agency and online fraud.
Right. So travel agency fraud, basically, it is whereby persons, in some instances, it appears as though the persons were generally involved in travel agency business, but something occurred and they take money for persons for travel, and they basically are unable to produce the ticket, the airfare for the person to travel. So in some instances, the person was able to go to point A, and they are unable, when they're going to return to the country, they were told that the ticket that they have is not valid. Additionally, in some other instances, it is one whereby no ticket at all. On the day in question, you arrive at the airport and there's no booking, etc. for you, yet you have, you would have received confirmation email from the travel agency, etc., advising that your date and time of flight, etc., and it is, well, simply put, bogus.
Okay, and the online, and then I'll...
Right, so online fraud, it's a wide category of fraud, and in some instances, in this instance, we've chosen to put investment fraud separate. Online fraud basically involves, as I mentioned, several factors. One of them is that we have what we call account takeovers. Mm-hmm. This is one whereby the person's account is compromised because they may have visited an unsecure site, etc. And when the person's account is taken over, a password reset is done, and the fraudster is able to now move funds from the victim's account to other person's accounts in some instances.
Okay, so two things coming out of this for me, Chairman. As it relates to your public awareness campaign, in terms of the types of fraud that we have here, mm-hmm. How robust is that? How effective is it? And also, you have, in 2020, we had 1,443 incidents, 21, 565, 22, 401, 23, 538, of all that you have listed as fraudulent scams, mm-hmm. right? In terms of your investigation into these incidents and, I don't know, arrest, do you have that kind of data that you could share with the committee? What's your success rate in terms of the reports of these incidents and arrest, leading to arrest?
Okay.
And conviction?
Well, let me firstly deal with the effectiveness of and our information sharing with the public with regards to this type of fraud. As Mr. Groom mentioned, we do in fact do outreach programs in terms of individuals and as well as organizations. We effectively go into organizations upon request and we try to not only speak to the organization about the different type of fraud that they may encounter and how to mitigate against this, but we also use the opportunity to inform individuals about fraud that they may come across. Additionally, we do in fact advertise on social media, etc., trying to inform persons about the various types of fraud, and through media releases, in some instances when persons are arrested, we do take the opportunity to highlight the type of fraud and to warn persons and give them preventative tips to mitigate against it. With regard to specific numbers, in terms of conviction, arrest, etc., to this type of fraud, I will have to give you those figures at a later date. We do, in fact, have, with regard to the persons arrested, we would have those figures. The conviction rate, we would try to our best to see how best we can get that.
Right into the
yes, to submit it at a later time.
Just two more questions, Chair. As it relates to identity fraud, is this the same as identity theft?
Right. Identity theft, identity fraud, it basically goes hand in hand. We mainly see this type of fraud rearing its head with regard to property fraud, whereby persons just, take over someone's identity with a view of, selling the person's property and that sort of thing, which is a rather, takes up a large chunk of the amount of reports, and in terms of dollar value, spanning millions of dollars.
So what are your numbers where that is concerned, in terms of the situation with land, people taking over identity to sell property? I don't know if it ties into land and property under fraudulent land, ties into that?
Yes, it does in fact tie in. If you just allow me a moment. Let me just get my figures, please. Right. So I can give you the figures with regard to, at the end of 2023, we have had 71 reports of property land fraud, and the dollar value has surpassed 12 million TT dollars.
Where are we, Madam Inspector, in terms of your arrest and conviction with this?
Well,
you have that figure now?
No, I don't have that figure. So, I don't have that figure at present, but we can in fact get those figures with regard to arrest. But I want to say, though, at the same time, to use this opportunity to highlight the fact that this type of fraud, it is a complex type of fraud to investigate. And so being that the person who takes over this person's identity, sometimes we don't have, obviously we don't have the name. Right. For starters. In some instances, we may just have a fictitious one form of ID. Sometimes the quality of it is not that good. And so we are just basically looking for a nameless, almost faceless person who came in, did this transaction, and then has disappeared. So it's a bit of a hindrance for us to investigate, but we do our best, nevertheless, to get the information that we can get in order to bring these persons to justice. And we have, in fact, brought some persons to justice.
So we look forward to the submission in writing so that we could get a little more details. Madam Chair, just have the one on ABS, but I don't know if you want to move on, and we could always come back to ATM. Okay, so in terms of your ATM frauds, thankfully we've seen a decrease from 2020 to 2023. We've seen a decrease. 2020 we had 1,159 incidents, and in 2023 we have 195. What do you think would be the factor that caused that downward trend?
Yes, well, we believe that the introduction of the chip card basically has reduced the amount of this type of fraud. With that technology, it affords several safeguards, and so far in Trinidad we have had no report of compromises of the chip card system.
But there's a concern by customers that the limit on some cards may be $400 that you just tap.
Yes, that is correct. But as I said, we have had no reports so far of that type of fraud being perpetrated. The person still, although the PIN is not required, they're still required to put whether it's savings or checkings, as the case may be. And, you know, so the bank basically put this minimum amount, I believe, to sort of mitigate the loss as opposed to a larger figure.
So, okay. So it's because of the new technology we believe that it has.
I believe that that is the cause.
Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Stoddard, first of all, I'd like to compliment the FIU for the number of training programs that they've put on for PEPs. One complaint, though, is that sometimes the program, the way it's presented, is very quick, and they don't ever give you the handouts. I think it would help if they were to deal with that. So if you could transmit that to the persons, and also the persons, the entities that have to submit information to you, they also need education on how do you prove source of income. It can be a great source of annoyance when you see that the kind of questions that you ask, it defies logic. The kind of evidence that they deem that they're not satisfied with, it is amazing. So I don't know if it's coming from your agency or somebody, but when you deal with institutions and they tell you that the bank slip that shows that it came from your account, and no, you need more than that. Yes, it does not make sense, and it's creating a great deal of frustration. So perhaps you need education on that side as well, the credit unions and other institutions that deal with members to try to fulfill your requirements.
Thank you, Chair, for that observation and question. Definitely, I would look at having the training the awareness that we provide for PEPs and other type of activities be a little more detailed or extended in any time factor. Handouts, that is something that we can provide at certain sessions. What we tend to do in some instances, the reason why we don't provide it is because other persons use it for their own financial benefit, so to speak. But we would definitely try to distribute some of those handouts. With respect to the other question, that has been a troubling source at the FIU. What we realize is that the financial institutions, as well as credit unions and other entities, tend to inform their customers that it is a requirement of the FIUTT that they need this and they need X, Y, and Y. The financial obligation regulations identify what information the financial institution or other entities are required to capture when they are establishing a business relationship. Of course, in the regulation, the entity would weigh their risk in terms of when they are treating with the customer, in terms of onboarding, as the case may be, and may ask for additional information that which the financial obligation regulation allows for they to do. However, we have and we continue to do outreach training sessions with the institutions to educate them in terms of some of the information that they may be asking for. Mind you, we cannot dictate to the institution what information that they shouldn't require. That is something that is left up to up to the institution to some extent, but the regulation clearly identifies some of the information that they do have to provide.
Level of education come into that?
Chair, it's an ongoing process. Like I said, we have been working with the central bank on some of those issues where customers are wrongly directed to the FIU in terms of filling out or being informed that they need to register with the FIU. So again, it's an ongoing educational process. We do have sessions that we have with the institution, credit unions included, that we try to give examples of what they should require or ask in terms of establishing that type of relationship. And I take your example in terms of someone coming with a bank statement and they're still asking additional information. That again is something that, based on the circumstances, I'm not certain, but if it is that the risk involved, that they make that determination that they want some other additional information. But it's not directly that the person needs to provide that additional type of information that may be requested in that situation. But again, like I said, based on the circumstances, I cannot say what it is, but the institution makes that final determination. And, like I said, we do try to educate all our programs that we do with the different sectors that we provide that awareness to. Part of it is included in terms of the transaction relationship, in terms of establishing a business relationship, in terms of reporting suspicious transaction and other things involved as well. But it's an ongoing process.
Anything that would, help to avoid minor irritations and decrease people's stress would be very welcome in these times, because sometimes all little things, people leave the place angry and they meet somebody there and it ends up in a fight, all because of something that happened somewhere else. So the level of stress in society is very high. So whatever you can do in your various institutions would be of great help.
Chair,
Thank you so much.
We would definitely continue.
We're not going to spend much time again, and apparently there's a sitting of the House this afternoon, and we must allow members to eat before they go to the House, because again, we don't want them going home hungry and angry. So that
Chairman,
we're going to finish very soon. Any burning questions for the various institutions that can be asked in 15 minutes, keep your questions short. I know I have not taken my own advice, but
Chairman, I will, but Chairman, you call the irritation minor. You're always too kind. What there are, according to your report, the financial fraud cases that are not completed between 2020 and 2023 exceeds 80%. Why?
Remember, that percentage in terms of not completed, it's related to the partly or mainly due to the bank systems being implemented in terms of customer due diligence. The transactions may not have been completed because the customer, in terms of fraud that was indicated in the submission, would be, for instance, if an entity, a customer, comes to the financial institution indicating that they would have received or they're involved in a contract with a foreign entity, and the contract is worth over 50 million US, and then they approach the bank for funding and for transfers and this sort of thing. Clearly, if the customer does not have a history of business or that type of activity, it's more than likely that the customer would have, again, received some online information and probably started some business relationship with that person. And it's highly likely that it's a scam that is being portrayed on the individual.
But Director Stoddard, why is it taking so long, though, to 80% in 3 years? Give us, in a sentence, I have another administrative justice question related to us, but why so long? And why so many? Why the high amount?
Shouldn't that be for the fraud squad, though?
I don't know. I've asked the question,
Not
but
the FI.
Director Stoddard answered, why is it taking so long?
As it relates to fraud investigations, there are a number of stoppages that we have no control over. When the money goes to Kuwait or Panama, MLAT only takes us so far. So if it passes through Citibank and transfer after that to some country we do not have mutual legal assistance with, it stops there. Maybe sometimes the jurisdiction do prosecute the low-hanging fruits or the runners, but the money is gone.
All right. Madam Chair, through you, you submitted, and it was submitted at the introduction of the legislative directions outlined in the Miscellaneous Amendment Act to 2020 has seriously impacted the ability of law enforcement to adhere to a speedy investigation. I am mystified at that, Chair. I thought it would have helped. Explain that to me, please. How? Because
Certainly,
this act was meant to speed it up. What you're saying, it has slowed it down. It's
And
counterintuitive.
Let me explain.
Short, time is limited.
So we have the Director of Public Prosecution with advising the financial institutions that he has given his consent for us to obtain a statement. But when we reach the financial institutions, there lies the problem. When we reach the financial institutions with the director's consent, we have a lengthy waiting period. A lengthy waiting period.
Yes, but that is unacceptable.
But we have no legislation that can force them or force anyone to give a statement for the documents we would have obtained by warrants or production orders.
Implicit in those documents is something of reasonableness and timeliness. Implicit in an order, because the more time you allow to go, is the more time you allow for the perpetrators to either A, cover their tracks, or B, go to Kuwait.
And the police has no control over it.
No, man.
So, through you, Chair, are you saying that you may acquire intelligence or information via a production order, and when it comes time to moving it to the level of evidence, even though you have the consent of the director, you are experiencing pushback or static from the financial institutions to produce those statements that could lead to charges?
Statements,
yes, that can lead to charges being
statements that will evidence the material that we have obtained.
So complain to the central bank, let the central bank intervene and put some turpentine on I'm
Or are there other mechanisms in place to subpoenas, court orders, etc.,
Yes.
to compel them to produce, certain things?
I can only think that if we can add into Section 32 when it comes to these matters that involve money laundering.
Yes.
That the judge, if policy or legislation can amend, that say that you ought to produce the statement within a timely factor, that will help us. Again,
Madam Chair, you Madam Inspector from the Central, Mr. Ombudsman, you understand what is being said here today, right? That there's an order of the DPP, there's urgency, and then there's lagly at the bank. Madam Chair, I need your intervention. What is your solution to that problem?
I mean, I don't know if I have a solution, but I will tell you what is required, because I took note. I took note of the statement. And through you, Madam Chair, I would like to pass to Nadira Rahmatullah, who is our manager, AML, just to advise of what our expectation is with respect to this issue.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Our understanding, and based on the law, in our view, production order is a legal order to compel information. It is our expectation that the financial institutions will comply with such orders. And I forget who made the statement, but from my understanding as well, those orders carry a specific time limit that is stipulated in law, in the Proceeds of Crime Act, in respect of money laundering investigations. So it's a production order. They are required to compel. What we've heard in terms of challenges faced by the financial institutions, in some instances, depending on the nature of information that is being requested as well. It may take time to produce that. So there may be some delays in terms of producing information. But in terms of the witness statement, they've already provided information. So as far as we are concerned, they are required to comply. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know if there are limitations in the law in terms of compelling them to provide that statement.
Madam Chair, we are not speaking about production orders. We are speaking about witness statements. So maybe, Madam Deputy Director of the Central Bank, you ought to issue a practice note or directive to banks relative to Senior Superintendent Groom, that when they get a directive from the Director of Public Prosecution, who is embodied under the Constitution, do this, that they act within a reasonable time and without delay.
Sorry, apologies. I did take note of the issue, and we will try to, we meet regularly with the BAT and with their subcommittee, and we'll try to understand the issue. Sorry, Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. So yeah.
But that is remarkable, though. What is, Madam Chair, what is being said here is remarkable. Wow. For our next meeting. But maybe you could collaborate with your colleague to your left a little more, because that will assist in speeding up the time frame, because no institution is a law unto itself in this country.
Yeah. Because we are...
It should not be.
Yes. Through you, Madam Chair, we are aware that in terms of the production orders, that they are required to comply with the production orders. We weren't aware of this other issue until today.
Well, Madam Chair, my last question, I promise after this I'll ask nothing. In your submission, this is from the police, and we're putting it on record now for the public, you indicated that as it related to commercial banks within recent times, the fraud squad has been facing challenges in receiving cooperation from these institutions. Please say that this is my misreading. Say it isn't so.
It comes back to the same point with the witness statements.
So it is so then?
It is so.
What is the nature of the challenges that relative to cooperation that is being experienced by the fraud squad? Tell us.
Sometimes we wait as long as a year and 3 months for a statement from some of the financial institutions. I'm not going to label all.
Did you say a year?
A year.
3 months?
3 months. And then sometimes the quality of the statement is not in a prosecutorial form.
Well, Madam Lakshmi Diyal,
Mr. Groom, because, we have the power to make recommendations and comments and so on in our report, can I ask you to supply us, you don't have to put names, but I would like the number of matters in which the fraud squad is awaiting witness statements based on legally obtained production orders, where you are awaiting witness statements from financial institutions. How many of those remain outstanding? If you wish to share the information with the central bank and the names of the institutions that fall under their supervisory remit, or even the TTSEC, I would encourage you to do that. But I would like to get the number of matters that are awaiting statements from financial institutions based on legally obtained production orders, because the conversion of intelligence to evidence is a significant step in bringing anybody to justice. And without the witness
yes.
statement, you can't lay charges, and it is time sensitive. You can't lay charges, and there may be people who are, as Member Scotland said, going to Kuwait without actually facing any repercussions under the law. So could you provide us with that information, please?
And Madam Chair, name the commercial institutions, because the committee will be entitled to specifically refer to those, and we don't want that all commercial institutions are painted with one negative brush. So could you name them, please, to the committee?
I will endeavor, sir.
Thank
Chair,
you.
Chair, through you, I have one, again, it goes back to the fraud squad. And yeah, so that is why it's there. Again, it will assist us as we prepare our report. The operational and resource challenges hindering the ability of the fraud squad to effectively detect and investigate financial fraud, and you listed a number of them in your submission. Staff and specialized staff to do analysis, vehicles, computers, software, printers, technology capacity, and focus-driven training. All of these things culminate. I mean, this is A through H. Is this consistent with what it is, and how is this being resolved? Is it being attacked? How are we dealing with this?
Through the administration of the police service, we have submitted, and I think that we are on track for this to be upgraded. I think the kept back last year was the procurement legislation that we had to await, and I think that up to this morning I did get a call that we are having computers being ordered and stuff for us. And as the training and stuff, that is in the pipeline.
Good, thank you.
We have one burning question that even my fellow committee members, and I could anticipate the response, but I want to ask it anyway, and that is with respect to the FIU. A lot of people have the idea when they hear FIU that you do investigations, and of course you are an administrative type FIU, but some of my colleagues were discussing with me and they are concerned and they want to know as well, and I think the general public wants to know, do you believe that the administrative type FIU is the appropriate model, and would it better be, would the country, given everything that's happening, be better served by looking at sort of the hybrid type investigative and administrative type FIU so that there's more teeth, investigative teeth for an organization like the FIU instead of reliance on the TTPS?
Thank you, member, for the question. That decision would definitely be a policy decision that would have to be taken by the government in terms of the type of FIU. What I can say is that we would have recently, the last Egmont Group meeting, the number of FIUs that operate, the majority of them, right now it's around 170. The majority of them are administrative type FIUs. In some jurisdictions, they actually switch from law enforcement to that type of FIU. But again, like I said, that decision would have to be a policy decision based on a review of the legislation and other matters before that decision can be taken. Thank you,
Before we ask for closing submissions from the entities present, we have a member of the public who asked the question, and we have to always include them in social media. Does the central bank work with the control of accounts towards reducing or preventing fraud in the government's accounting system? If so, what's the nature of this relationship?
The short answer is no, Madam Chair. We do not work with the controller of accounts on that matter. We would utilize, if there's a fraudulent matter uncovered, we would utilize our supervisory capabilities in treating with the matter. As I mentioned earlier, if they were required to make a report to us, if they need to report to the the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service on the nature of the fraud matter. And we would take measures from there if we need to conduct further investigation as to what contributed to the fraud and whether the institution needs to strengthen its internal systems and controls to treat with an issue that may have contributed to the fraud. But there's no requirement in terms of reporting to the Controller of Accounts on this matter. Thanks.
So we'll take very brief closing remarks from the officials present, starting with Ms. Michelle Francis Pantor, Mr. Arlette Groom, and Mr. Nigel Stoddard. Short and sweet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In summary, the Central Bank is very concerned about the impact of cybersecurity and fraud on customers of financial institutions. And we are working with the financial institutions diligently we are working with the financial institutions for them to address this diligently, promptly, and treat with customers fairly to prevent, detect, and deal with financial fraud. The culture of strong cybersecurity practices must be at all levels of financial institutions, be it shareholders, board, management, staff, and suppliers. And there's also a necessity to educate the public at large in terms of cybersecurity and fraudulent matters and how they can protect their personal information. Central Bank is also working with international agencies such as the International Monetary Fund and the Bank of International Settlements, as well as other regional central banks, to develop appropriate cybersecurity supervision strategies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the administration of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, I would say that it was a pleasure being here, that we have aired our concerns. We have received the questions that have been posed to us. We have ways to go forward. We have been educated in some ways, and we seek greater collaboration with our stakeholders that we can serve Trinidad and Tobago in a better way or a meaningful way and try to be the premium fraud investigative unit within the Caribbean, I would say. So without much ado, I say thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chair.
Now we have the Financial Intelligence Unit of TNT.
Thank you, Chair and members. I would not go into my closing statement, but I will just do it off the cuff based on time. As I said at the opening, this type of meeting is definitely needed, and it's definitely important. And coming out of the discussions today, we definitely see some of the needs and the gaps that were identified. Going forward, I definitely think that the collaboration is the key in terms of the different entities around the table, not only at this present time, but other competent authorities dealing with this type of activity on a holistic approach, a more collaborative approach in terms of the separation of the silos. I want to definitely ensure that the FIU TT would continue to publicize the different advisories, the different typologies to not only the financial institutions and to the public, as well as the different, the other regulators, and continue to work together to ensure that the loss in this particular area would be reduced in some way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks to all of you for your contribution to today's proceedings. I think it has been a very fruitful discussion. All of us have learned quite a lot. I just want to remind some of you have homework to do. Sending some, questions that we've asked, follow up, and we expect to get those reports because they will factor into the end report that we have to submit to the Parliament. I would like to thank the staff of the Parliament for their procedural and logistical support, the viewing and listening audience, to all the members of the committee, thank you for your contribution. I extend Easter greetings to all of you, and I declare the meeting at an end. Thank you.